Have you ever pondered about who's truly to blame for the difficulties faced by company truck drivers? Let's explore this often ignored viewpoint. We've all heard the stories of truck drivers, those sturdy folks facing the open road who are underpaid, overworked, and underappreciated. We're informed that they're the victims, the unfortunate pawns in a game of corporate strategy. We sympathize, we empathize, and we express disappointment. But did we ever pause to question this narrative? What if the real story isn't as simple as it seems? What if there's more to it than the basic tale of the exploited truck driver? Could it be possible that, in some manner, these drivers aren't just victims, but also contributors and instigators of their own situation? We're not implying that they're gladly accepting low wages or are content to be overworked and ignore their own families. No, the problem is far more intricate. It's about the decisions they make, or more accurately, the decisions they don't make. Ponder this. Truck drivers, particularly those employed by companies, are in a unique position. They form the backbone of the logistics industry, an industry that absolutely cannot function without them. They possess the ability to demand improved conditions, higher wages, better retirement, and home time options, and overall better treatment. Yet, they do not. Why? They continue to take on low-paying jobs. They continue to endure long hours and weeks away from home in tough conditions. They continue to work for companies that exploit them. But why? Why don't they unite and demand better? Why don't they introduce unions into their workplaces to fight their rights? Don't their own families deserve better? Is it fear? Is it indifference? Or is it simply a lack of knowledge? Whatever the reason, the truth is that they are not just victims of exploitation, but also willing participants in it. And so we revert back to our original question. Could it be that the drivers themselves are the creators of their own hardship? It's a challenging thought, isn't it? But sometimes the most challenging questions are the ones that lead us to the truth. Company truck drivers complain about low wages, lack of benefits, and non-existent work-life balance schedule. But who accepts these jobs in the first place? Isn't it the very drivers who lament about their meager earnings? They are not coerced into these positions. No one is holding them at gunpoint. They willingly sign on the dotted line, accepting the terms and conditions of their employment. And yet, they find themselves in a predicament of their own making. One they could avoid, or at least mitigate if they were more discerning about the jobs Let's not ignore the harsh realities of life. Many of these drivers might be forced by circumstances to take whatever job they can get. The bills won't pay themselves after all. Yet, it is crucial to remember that every time a driver accepts a low-paying job, they're essentially telling their employers that it's okay to offer such wages. They're sending a message that it's fine to undervalue their hard work and dedication. Imagine this. If every driver decided tomorrow that they won't work for less than a certain compensation package, what do you think would happen? Would companies have a choice but to increase their incentives? By accepting low wages, drivers are setting an unfortunate precedent for themselves and their families. They're creating a vicious cycle where low pay becomes the norm, and anything higher is viewed as a luxury. What's even more concerning that these drivers often find themselves working long, grueling hours, away from home for weeks at a time, with earnings 15% lower than they had in the 1970s. They're on the road for days, sometimes weeks, away from their families, living a life of solitude. And for what? For a paycheck that barely covers their expenses, not to mention a family at home? Is that fair? Or are they choosing ignorance and refusing to change? It is time for drivers to take a hard look at their choices and think about their families. If they continue to accept low compensation, they're essentially endorsing their own exploitation. They're giving companies a green light to continue with their unfair practices, and as long as this continues, the problem of low wages and destructive work schedules will persist. By these low wages, aren't drivers setting a precedent for their own exploitation? The unions could provide a solution, but why haven't company truck drivers united? Now that's a question worth pondering. A union could be a powerful force for change, providing collective bargaining power to negotiate better wages, retirement plans, and fairer working conditions. Imagine if every truck driver across the country could speak with one voice. Imagine if they could stand together against exploitation and demand fair treatment with at least prevailing wages. But alas, the reality is quite different. Despite the obvious, unionization among company truck drivers remains a distant dream. Why is this so? What's holding these hardworking individuals back from standing up for their rights? The answer is complicated. but let's break it down. A major stumbling block is the lack of courage among drivers to do what's right for themselves and their families. They may be overwhelmed by the magnitude of such an endeavor, preferring the safety of their current circumstances over the uncertainty that comes with organizing a union and a potential of better life for themselves and their families. Then, there's also the issue of education. Many drivers simply aren't aware of their rights or the potential benefits of a union. They may feel powerless or believe that their situation is unchangeable. In other words, it is stupidity or ignorance due to lack of information and research. But knowledge and education could be the key to unlocking the potential of unionization. Lastly, there's the issue of mindset. Some drivers may feel resigned to their circumstances, believing that low pay and unfair practices are just part of the job. They may feel that they have no choice but to accept the status quo. These drivers usually hang around people like themselves, those with low self-esteem and low self-image. So, here we are, at a crossroads. Unions could be the key to improving the lives and livelihoods of company truck drivers and their families, but it's up to the drivers themselves to take that first step. Isn't it the driver's responsibility to stand up, unite, and demand fair treatment? Real freight rates haven't actually dipped, so why are drivers still pocketing less while brokers are profiting as much as 50% and in some cases even more per freight bill? This is a question we should all be pondering. The idea of declining freight rates is a misconception, a falsehood propagated by those who profit the most from it. This story has been spun by brokers, carriers, and recited by brain-dead media, a deception game played to bamboozle those who are naive, ignorant, and stupid. Many company drivers fall into this trap. Despite a widespread belief, freight rates have neither plummeted nor waned. In fact, they have held their ground, even making small gains in certain regions. So why are drivers, the pillars of the freight industry, still breaking their backs to barely earn a living? Why are they enduring low-wage jobs, extended working hours, sacrificing their health and family moments for a minimal salary? The response is plain, yet intricate. The answer lies within the cunning distortion of the narrative by brokers and carriers. These players have sketched an image of a struggling industry, of rates so low that they can just scrape by to pay their drivers. A bold-faced lie, as their financial statements confirm. They argue that the market is flooded with drivers but doesn't have enough freight to cater to them. However, this narrative is a meticulously designed illusion. There is no shortage of freight or surplus of drivers. The only thing that's rampant is the greed of brokers and carriers. They are the ones amassing wealth, setting new profit records while drivers continue to toil. However, we cannot deem drivers as mere victims in this situation. They are partaking in their own exploitation and doing nothing about it, accepting the narrative presented to them without a second thought, without any resistance. They allow themselves to be manipulated, to be coerced into accepting less than their worth. They watch as their CEOs receive record bonuses while their own financial stability dwindles and families disintegrate. They need to raise their voices and demand better. They need to question, are we not contributing to our own exploitation by not standing up to these false narratives? The misconception of plunging freight rates needs to be refuted, and it is smart drivers themselves who should lead this change. Are drivers signing their own doomsday by remaining passive in this scenario? Isn't their family's well-being more important than maintaining the existing state of affairs? It's time to take this conversation in a new direction. Drivers, you are not just cogs in a machine, you are the blood that fuels this industry, are the backbone of the freight industry. It's time you recognized your worth and demanded what's rightfully yours. If you don't, who will? The brokers? The carriers? They're too busy counting their profits at your expense. And those who had mismanaged their own funds and were known as bottom feeders went out of business. As they should. It's time to wake up from this illusion, to shatter the false narrative that's been forced upon you. Stop being ignorant and leave the fool's errand before you will lose your family due to lack of financial stability and time spent with them. It's time to question, to challenge the status quo. Your silence, your acceptance of this distorted reality is your downfall. Your inaction is your consent to this exploitation. This is not just about you, it's about your families as well. Every hour you spend on the road, every mile you drive, every load you carry, it's all for them. But what good is it if they have to struggle with you, to see you break under the weight of currently unjust system that you had created and supported? It's time to take a stand, to say enough is enough. It's time to fight for fair and at least prevailing wages, for better working conditions, for your rights as drivers and family men. It's time to hold those accountable who have been profiting off your hard work. Remember, change begins with you. It's time to start that change, to make a difference, to take back your life. It's time to fight for your future, for the future of your families, while you still have it. It's time to say no to exploitation. Time to reclaim your worth. Time to stop being stupid and be treated like a fool that some of you are. By educating yourself and removing people from your life who will drag you down, because if you won't, who will? You and the lives of your families depend on it. As we wrap up, we hope you've gained a deeper understanding of the plight facing our hard-working truck drivers. We hope you're as fired up to bring about necessary changes in the trucking industry. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. In fact, this is just the beginning. We encourage you to take action to amplify the message of driver empowerment. Like, subscribe, and share this video. Spark conversations with your friends, your coworkers, and on your social media platforms. Every share, every conversation, every tweet, every post helps to raise awareness and bring us one step closer to a fair and just trucking industry. Remember, each one of us has a role to play. By spreading the word, you're not just a passive viewer, but an active participant in the fight for driver empowerment. And to the drivers out there, we urge you to keep fighting for your rights, for prevailing wages, and for better working conditions. Know your worth, and don't settle for less. By standing up for yourself, you're setting a precedent for future generations of truck drivers. Together, you have the power to bring about change. Together, you can ensure that no truck driver has to bear the brunt of exploitation and loose-owned family. Thank you for watching, and remember, the road to empowerment and change starts with you.